Hey, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the RetroPGF podcast. This is where we talk about everything RetroPGF and share the stories of those who have already been successful at earning RetroPGF through their positive impact on the optimism ecosystem. Today, I am very excited to be joined by the founder of BuidlGuidl, Austin Griffith. Thanks for coming, Austin.
Thanks for having me.
So I'm really excited to have Austin on the show because, in my opinion, he's what RetroPGF is all about. Austin is the quintessential builder. As I was kind of doing my research, trying to go a little bit deep on your Medium and your YouTube, I was just amazed at how many projects you've actually put out over the last 2 years. And the best part is that a lot of these projects, if not most of them, are actually builds that empower other builders, like BuidlGuidl, of course, and then things like Speed Run Ethereum and Scaffold-Eth, which are related, but even things like the Nifty, the NFT onboarding project that you had. It's all about giving people access to some of the amazing things that blockchain um, provides, whether that's as a developer or as an artist or a creator. And so that's really awesome. Thank you so much for coming on and taking the time to talk to us today.
Thanks for having me. It was nifty.inc
Yeah,
too. You can go to
Nifty.inc.
nifty.inc on like a tablet and just start drawing and mint something. And we pay the gas and it uses burner wallets. So it's meta transactions and burner wallets on a side chain.
So
So
artists don't
a neat way
even
to do
need
onboarding.
any kind of do they need a MetaMask to mint something?
Nope.
That
No MetaMask, no gas, no
that's
anything. It
awesome.
generates a wallet for you when you land, and then it uses that wallet to sign. But then that signature goes through another thing called a meta transaction, and I pay the gas. So you don't have to have anything. You just land on the page and you draw something and you make an NFT.
Amazing. Yeah, it's Nifty, literally Nifty, Nifty.inc, if anyone wants to check it out while we're talking. Um, so I think maybe we could just start way back when. I saw some of your first Medium posts were way back in 2017. When did you actually first get involved in crypto? What's the story there?
Yeah, I think it was like 2016, 2017. 2016 was like learning, and 2017 was like building. And I started by building like a bunch of games and things like that, but I really didn't have any impact in the ecosystem until I started making tools. The ecosystem was not ready for games.
Uh-huh.
We needed more tools. It was hard to deploy contracts, like even just like yeah, just like contract orchestration was hard. So I spent a lot of time building things to be able to even deploy apps. But yeah, about 2016, 2017. Sorry, I should answer the question better.
No, that's fine. No, it's good. Do you remember what your first project was that really uh, other people kind of started using or that gained you a little bit um, of recognition in the ecosystem?
It was probably the burner wallet at ETH Denver in 2019. But it was the second ETH Denver, and you got a coin at the door, and the coin, you could point your camera at the coin and it had a QR code on it. So you scan this coin and it's your private key. And then by scanning it, you just get a wallet. It just opens it up in a web browser. And then the food trucks at ETH Denver all had QR codes. So you would scan one of those with your phone to buy things with your burner wallet. And I think at that time, it was the first time someone had done like a custody wallet that had that a non-custodial wallet that had that kind of user interface that was that smooth, and it was kind of just like a magic experience. And I think that really got me into the space.
That's awesome. Yeah, I saw one of the videos on that actually. Did you actually uh, plan that out ahead of time? Because was it actually used at that ETH Denver, or was it a demo?
Yeah, it was a planned thing. We started in like November, so we started like months and months ahead of time. I like So much so that I held 3 or 4 events at bars around Colorado and Wyoming leading up to ETH Denver to make sure the user experience was going to be smooth, knowing that we were going to have like 4,000 meals purchased on a crypto wallet. I really had to like test the user experience of the crypto wallet a lot. And so I just like would go to a bar. I would give the bartender money. I would set up a iPad, and then people would come in the door and I would hand them slips of paper, like a little pamphlet looking thing. It was kind of like a little card and it had a QR code on it, and you would scan it and you would have like $8. And then you would go up to the bartender and you would ask to buy something, and you would scan a QR code and pay your $8 and get your beer. And so I did that like over and over again a lot, like many, many weeks leading up to ETH Denver, just working out all the different kinks of the app and making sure it was smooth. So then by the time ETH Denver rolled around, the user experience, it was still tough,
Right, right.
but it was, mostly good.
That's amazing that you just kind of enlisted all these bars and just kind of forced your way into
For
their
sure.
system to help. That's definitely, I think that's, yeah, just I think it's really cool, the kind of the hacking mindset that you sustained for such a long period of time, and especially how you've given that to others through Build Guild. So, do you want to do maybe a little bit of an intro on Build Guild, just for those that are listening that might not have heard of it before?
Yeah, for sure. I think that like my shilling kind of comes in circles, and if we were to look at the most inner circle, it's probably Scaffold-Eth, which is like a tool for building and prototyping and tinkering with Solidity. And then around that is speedrunethereum.com, which is a curriculum that has you use Scaffold-Eth to build a bunch of things like dexes and multi-sigs and staking apps that teach you the most important kind of aha things that you can build with Ethereum. And then around all of that is the Build Guild. And the Build Guild is as much a community as it is a piece of software on chain. It's a DAO that receives grant funding, like RetroPGF, and then it redistributes that money. It's kind of like a pass-through organization where it receives grant money, and then it gives that grant money back out in the form of streams. Almost always, we've given a few small grants like straight up, but almost all of our grant giving is in the form of a stream, and our streams are a special kind of stream. They work in a different way than you'll find any other stream on chain, and the way they work is they start full, and you withdraw from them, and when you withdraw, they start to recharge until they get to a full state, and then they pause. And this is a really powerful mechanism for contributors that are part-time, nights and weekends, working at multiple DAOs, where I can open up a stream to you, and you can withdraw from it right away, and you turn in what you're working on. So that kind of effect of you turn in what you're working on, and if you're not working on anything, your stream sort of pauses, creates this really nice balance of DAO work where when folks are contributing, they're withdrawing. When they're not contributing, they're doing something else. The streams require you to sort of turn in something when you withdraw, so it creates this really nice feedback loop. It's a really great way for me to be able to YOLO to a lot of people and then get a good feedback and social loop going. So the you asked me what Build Guild is, and I know I kind of gave you all the circles and
Yeah.
Scaffold you could speedrun Ethereum and Build Guild. But Build Guild is kind of on the outside, is kind of like the incentivization layer that keeps everything else going.
So let me see if I can kind of put this into my own words of understanding and see if I'm actually right about this. So, Build Guild is basically this community of builders that are building things, maybe of their choosing, using community of builders that have successfully passed through Speedrun Ethereum, and they're building things probably using Scaffold ETH. And when they build something, they get the reward of being able to withdraw from their specific stream, which is constantly topped up by like the central pool of funding for all the builders. Is that right? I didn't even say that in the
Yeah,
most concise way, but
that's a really good way to put it. I think that like we're way more focused on developer onboarding and education than we are on grant giving, but the grant giving is a big part of it. And if you make it all the way to the streaming part, you know, it's awesome. There's less than 100 people on streams. I think it's probably right at about 100 people, so it's not like this really big thing. Whereas we've had, you know, thousands of people come through our curriculum. The people who really end up getting funding are a much smaller amount of people that kind of end up sticking around and kind of contributing and giving back. So there's a lot of people that are just like going through the content and ejecting out and like, you know, going and building something in the ecosystem and providing value. The people that end up on streams are more like, you know, either they're still learning, they're still figuring it out, and it does take a while. I mean, it can take like a year or two of building on Ethereum before you build something that really gets a bunch of users.
right.
So there is like some people that are on streams like that, but yeah, the way you explained it is right. Except I would say that like careful to like leaning too hard into like everyone who goes through the speed run gets a stream. We wouldn't be able to afford that.
Okay, gotcha. I'm curious, could you maybe talk a little bit about scaffold ETH? Scaffold-Eth is the right way to say
Yep.
it, right? And then I'm also
Yeah. Scaffold-Eth. Yep.
curious, you mentioned that Speed Run Ethereum, it's about kind of guiding people through these aha moments as developers where they can really get a blockchain concept. I'm curious what some of those actually are because I haven't been through the curriculum myself. But I'm curious.
Are you a developer? Like, do you know what a cron job is?
Yes. Yeah, my background is as a
Cool.
developer. I'm actually
Dope.
probably a good candidate to go through Speedrun Ethereum because I was a backend developer, and then I've done enough Solidity and enough hackathons to kind of understand what's going on, but I haven't necessarily built a end-to-end product or something on Ethereum
Yep.
yet. So um,
You're ready for speedrun
yeah, it
Ethereum
sounds
for
like it.
sure. So let's see. The question was just like more information about Scaffold-Eth and like what speedrun. Oh, the aha moments. Okay, so Scaffold-Eth
Right.
is kind of your back end and your front end all at once. I think that a lot of traditional Solidity development is kind of like you're writing Solidity and then you're writing tests, and then you take this big contract you've written and you take it to an auditor, and the auditor audits it for $90,000, and then 6 months later you pay someone to build a front end for your finalized and audited smart contract. And that's just like not how I build, and I don't think that like most product builders build. And my theory is that most prototypers don't build that way. I think that like traditionally a lot of products we have seen kind of built in the way that I described, but I think that if you want to build a good product on Ethereum and you don't know exactly how it's going to work yet, you need to tinker. You need to kind of like write a little bit of your smart contract and write a little bit of your front end and have the two talk and see how it works. And you know, maybe you're building a round based game. You need to like play the game a little bit and make sure the round works and make sure the incentives work. So Scaffold-Eth really leans into the tinkering aspect of things, where you can grab, you know, a mapping in Solidity and paste it into your contract and then see it immediately in the front end also, and query against that mapping and say, you know, what's the value for Vitalik or whatever. So Scaffold-Eth lets you paste in and edit and tinker with Solidity, and then it gives you a front end that you immediately like have burner wallets, and you're making transactions against your smart contract right away. You're not writing a big bank of tests right away. You sort of like set up an ownership pattern, and then you try it as the owner, and you try it as like one other account that's not the owner, and you make sure that it works the way you think it does, right? You're just like testing your assumptions, you're trying things out. So that's like Scaffold-Eth, except for now it's a state of the art tool with state of the art tools built into it, where you're tinkering around, but then there's all these components to build out an app, and you're basically like, one command away from going to production. A lot of demos I do when I'm not on a Twitter space, I'll do a demo like on Zoom. I basically build something. Like I start from scratch, and in 45 minutes, I've deployed an app to a live L2 that people can go interact with, and I have a URL that goes with it. It's really like a hackathon stack that takes you to production.
That's awesome.
And so that's Scaffold-Eth.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And so
Okay, go ahead. So Speed Run Ethereum, is that what you were going?
So then, so
Yeah.
then, Speed Run Ethereum is sort of like the curriculum around Scaffold-Eth. Once you can pick up Scaffold-Eth, you can tinker around with a few things. You can figure out kind of like once you get Scaffold-Eth up locally, it's kind of like your license to learn, and you start tinkering. But like you said, okay, so I understand the ecosystem a little bit. I can write some Solidity. I'm a coder. Usually that person, like they dive in and they start using Ethereum like it's a database, and they build a bunch of projects with like these giant structs with a lot of storage. And really what you need to do is you need to go through almost like this tour of duty, building things that have actually shipped on Ethereum that actually got users, building things like a DEX, building things like a multi-sig, building things like even an NFT project. But one of the most important projects you'll build is a decentralized staking platform. And the reason why it's so important is it teaches you as the developer the kind of thing that you're going to build on Ethereum. And you're basically building this staking app that's like a state machine where a bunch of people who don't trust each other need to coordinate financially. And in any other sense of this, you would have to have some trusted party, some kind of escrow. But in this sense, you can have the smart contract as the escrow, and everybody only has to trust the rules within the smart contract. And the rules are simple. It's sort of like there's this timestamp in the future that we all have to have our money staked by that timestamp. There's some function that lets us stake, and there's some mechanism to keep track of that. There's some rules that are written that don't let other people withdraw other people's money, right? But then there's this moment where after the time period, someone needs to initiate a transaction that sort of decides if the group got enough money together. And if the group gets enough money together, it moves to sort of the successful state of the state machine where maybe they go on to buy an NFT and create a DAO or something. Or they didn't, successfully get enough money together, and you need to move to like a withdraw pattern where everyone can get their money back. And this like really kind of highlights the kind of thing you're going to build on Ethereum and the way you're going to build it. You sort of have this timing mechanism. You have this idea of a state machine. But one thing that's really interesting here is the fact that this isn't automatic. When you think of like smart contracts and DAOs, you think of like a lot of automation and magic happening, but everything has to be poked. And this is why I asked about the cron job when you were asking about aha moments. On Ethereum, first of all, like no one trusts each other. So you're trying to get these like people that don't trust each other to coordinate. But also the thing's not automatic. Someone has to poke it. And so what you have to do is you have to create some mechanism on chain that incentivizes someone to click the button. So if you needed a cron job, let's move out of the
Right.
decentralized
I'm kind of
staking
putting the
state machine, and let's go
pieces
straight into the
together.
yeah,
Yeah.
let's go straight into the cron job. And let's say you've got to have this thing that runs once a night. The way you get that to run, traditionally as a Web2 person, you would be like, fine, I'll set up a service, I'll make sure the service checks in, but that service could fall over, right? We're talking about an always on blockchain system. Like the blockchain does not go down anymore. And so you can't, you're as weak as your weakest link. If you have some service that's in the cloud that could always go down, there's a chance that maybe it's compounding interest every night. And for some reason, some attacker figures out how to shut down your cron job that's like a Web 2 cron job. Your Web 3 cron job doesn't keep running anymore, right? If it's just a machine checking in. So to create something that runs no matter what, and you can't stop it, you basically have to write the rules correctly and create incentives around those rules. And the rules would be you can check in, only one person can check in once per day, and whoever checks in gets paid X amount of money. And if you set up that system correctly and you make it easy for people to check in, and it's censorship resistant, always on network, so it's very easy to check in. If the right incentives are in place, then that thing's going to run forever. And that's one of the first ahas of like, oh, I see what we're building here. We're building like these always on, censorship resistant, trustless networks that let people who don't trust each other participate and doesn't censor anyone. So anyone with an internet connection can contribute to these systems. And I think those are kind of some of the examples of aha moments you'll have on Speed Run Ethereum.
That's amazing. Yeah, I think it really does sound like a perfect entrance to the rabbit hole for people who are curious, crypto curious, because yeah, what you're talking about resonates. Like some of these things that on a blockchain, it's a different type of computing system where you kind of have to shift your mindset out of the web 2 and into what's possible, not only what's possible but what's different, because you can't just, like you're saying, you can't just run a cron job on a service. That sounds really awesome. I think after this talk I'm gonna go poke around on speedrun ethereum because it
You
sounds
should
cool. um
go get them.
how long, curious, does it take in general for someone to complete a speedrun?
That's tough. I mean, it could be a matter of a few days if you were good at it and getting through it quickly. It could be a matter of weeks if you're kind of going through it nights and weekends. There's a lot of things to learn there and a lot of like rabbit holes you can go down. You could, take the Dex challenge and then, realize that we don't have slippage protection and spend 2 weeks learning about how, slippage protection or, capital efficiency and so many different things down the rabbit hole work, even just like how signed messages work. Once you take on the multi-sig challenge and you learn about signed messages, then you start going down this rabbit hole of things like we were talking about Nifty Inc. earlier, like meta transactions and all the different like account abstraction details that have come out over the last couple of years. So it's sort of like you could speed run through it, you could speed run the speed run, but you might even miss some things and it takes some time. So it's hard to tell. It kind of depends on the person, but
Right.
there's a lot of content to learn.
Gotcha. um Well, maybe we can shift gears a little bit because this is the Retro PGF podcast and talk a little bit about Retro PGF. So, BuidlGuild was did really well in the last round of Retro PGF. Um, they were number 5 overall in funding. I'm curious, at what point did you actually first become aware of Retro PGF and that BuidlGuild would potentially be eligible?
So do you mean RetroPGF the idea or RetroPGF the
Specifically,
campaign that
yeah,
Optimism?
Optimism's iteration of RetroPGF.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I've been pretty close. I was actually a badge holder, so I was a voter who wasn't allowed to vote on Build Guild, of course, but I've been pretty close to it the whole time.
Awesome. And so, did you immediately? Were you actually a badge holder for round 1 as well?
Very first.
Oh,
Yeah.
awesome,
Yep. Yep.
awesome! I didn't realize that. That's awesome. So yeah, you were aware right away. Was Build Guild eligible in round 1, or were they part of that cohort?
I think so. Yes, I think Scott Moore nominated us. And I feel like that's probably like the moment he nominated us, that's probably when I started finding out about this stuff. So shout out to Scott Moore from Gitcoin.
Awesome. Um, so when you um I know initially you started, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you started Build Guild kind of out of your own pocket, um, funding these streams. Is that right?
Yeah, so going back to that burner wallet that we had at ETH Denver, I ended up like shipping a product that allowed you to swap from DAI to ETH, and it used Uniswap behind the hood. And so what happened there is I had a bunch of wallets that I had used to swap on Uniswap, and then Uniswap did an airdrop. So I got like $100,000 probably.
Awesome.
And so I was able to use those airdrops to then support other developers. And so it was like a lot of my own money for the beginning, but then like kind of as I started running out of money, the Ethereum Foundation stepped in and started giving us grants. And then thanks to RetroPGF, we got a big grant from Optimism also. So it did start with my own money, but that wasn't going to last that much longer. And thankfully, some great foundations stepped in to help.
Right, that's great. That's kind of awesome that you decided to purpose those Uniswap funds into growing the ecosystem even more. Um, so, like I said, Build Guild was number five overall, and you've had some success with grants from other sources as well. Why do you think it is that Build Guild resonated with the badge holders in the most recent round of Retro PGF?
Well, I mean, it's hard for. I'm definitely drinking the Kool-Aid of Build Guild. So, like, I personally think Build Guild is like a public good of Ethereum, but that's one of those things that it's like you have to prove it, not just say it. But I think that the reason why Build Guild resonated with folks is because we are like very altruistically, but very strategically, like working toward developer onboarding and developer education. I think that you'll maybe conversely in the space you'll see people who maybe pump a project and go for quick earnings, or someone who even creates a tool and then even looks like an altruistic thing, but then this person kind of only plugs their own tool. Like we've built our own tools and thrown our own tools away a few times, right? Like we're thinking about the space and we're leaving our ego behind, and we're spending a lot of time thinking about what is the journey for a developer when they start to learn. How do we give them the aha moments? How do we mentor them? We're like all the way through that pipeline, we're coming up with ways to kind of make it better for a developer and capture them and give them value. And I think the ecosystem sees that. And it's hard, and there's a lot of noise in the space, and we don't really market ourselves very well, but we're working hard to do what I think is really good work within the ecosystem to build a bigger, better developer ecosystem. And I think the ecosystem at large just sort of recognizes that when we come down, when it comes down to 40 or 100 badge holders that kind of do have their pulse on the space, not what shitcoin you're there. When we think of like crypto and crypto knowledge and crypto building, like product market fit looks like Pepe coin, right? But when you peel off a couple layers of bullshit and you get to like what's really happening, I think that you find sort of these much bigger, better projects and contributors. And so when you pull a bunch of badge holders that have been around for a long time, they can kind of see through the garbage and they can find the stuff that has good value. And I personally think the Build Guild is one of those. But we should I definitely want to like talk about like where this money goes
Yeah,
that came from optimism, and how like how value will be driven back to optimism because of it. Like it's a really interesting thing.
yeah, I'd love to hear about that. Let's hear it. Go ahead.
So retro PGF, retro funding is usually this group did something good already, and it's really easy for us to see, in hindsight, that they were going to ship the awesome product because they shipped the awesome product. So we're just going to YOLO them funding. And when you do that, you sort of create this ecosystem of, okay, so if I just like do awesome things, like there may be a YOLO out there for me. I just need to keep hustling at it. And it creates this really cool ecosystem. But in this case, I mean, we were rapidly building cool things on Optimism. But when Optimism gives us $200,000 or something like that, the fire is ignited. And we are definitely like a big group of builders. And today I was on with a bow tie, and we did bow tie Friday, and we showed off probably 10 different builds of varying levels of builders. We have this factory of builders and tooling and tools and creators, And when you YOLO a bunch of optimism to us, that really sparks a lot of things, and we start going after things. So one thing is there's a well, it's the mechanism that the badge holders use to vote. It was like a D form or something, but it was a
Right,
Web3 app,
right.
but it was hard to use. It really sucked. Like no offense to y'all, but like the form like did not even add up your total, so you didn't know if you had a total of 100 votes or not. You had to like manually add them up. Like the software was out of like 1976 or something like that. But Optimism puts out this RPF or something like that. I can't remember. Request. It's like a request for the community to build, and BuidlGuidl attacked that. We have a channel with like 17 builders in it, and the RPF like states a handful of things, and it's like, so we need to be able to have all these projects. You need to be able to have project discovery. You need to allow the badge holders to vote. You need to put the votes into this like attestation service, EAS. There's like a handful of different technologies that are even listed in the RPF. And so I'm like bugging people, like back channeling to Optimism, like like how do we help? How do we build this thing? And Optimism's trying to put out the information as fast as they can put it together too. They're strapped too. So we're like building builds that are like prototypes of the build because we don't have enough information about what the actual final build is going to look like. And today, Damu showed off a prototype that uses EAS, which is the attestation service that Optimism wants to use. And that was just for Bowtie Friday. He just made a prototype that lets you attest to different Build Guild members or something like that. The whole point is let's get Damu, a really good dev, understanding how EAS works. So when we have the full picture of what Optimism wants us to build, we already know what some of these parts look like. And so this is just like an example of something where these retro funds are going to us retroactively for being good in the past, but they're also like really motivating us to make sure we provide value for Optimism in the future too. And it's also like all of these funds that are coming into us are going to go back out to these developers that are building these things that are hopefully going to shape and make the Optimism ecosystem better.
That's so awesome. And I think the beautiful part of that is once all of these devs build these tools, if the tools have a positive impact, they'll be rewarded again, and thus starts the cycle for really making the whole ecosystem better.
Exactly. And I think that's like this slight tangent, but this reminds me of how the Build Guild streams work, where sometimes you just need the push to get started. Sometimes if someone waits around for someone to give them permission or someone to pay them, they may never get started. But if you sort of like open up a stream and you're already paying them and there's, a half an ETH that they can withdraw whenever they want, then it's like, oh gosh, well, I need to go get something done. I need to go after it. So I think in a weird way, like retro PGF is cool because it's easier to determine who's already done good things. But once you start YOLOing money, you're gonna like spark this whole, like next set of things to get built.
Yeah, it's kind of similar, like you're saying, in the way where the money is already there. Everybody right now knows that in the fall there's round three of Optimism's Retro PGF, and there are 30 million OP tokens this time available. There were 10 million last round, so it's three times as big. And so yeah, anybody that wants to build something, and the nominations are open as well. So if you build something that's good enough to make an impact, then the money's there for you, right? You might not know exactly how much, but it definitely is like a push in the right direction.
I have another fun Optimism funding story to add to this.
Yeah, let's
Is
hear
now a
it.
good time to
Yeah, yeah,
tangent? Is
yeah.
that okay? Okay, so then in another effort of ours has been to find these up and coming high impact developers. So I'm always on the hunt for these type of folks. And one place that I found them kind of in a tight collection is at hacker houses. So I've been kind of like keeping my eye on different hacker house organizers and different hacker houses. And I have recently made friends with Jessie from Jessie's Hacker House. And I don't know if you know Jessie from Jessie's Hacker House, but she's like hella famous in our space for curating the best vibes at hacker houses and finding the best hackers for hacker houses. And so I just immediately fell in love with her process and the people that she has around her. And we just started YOLOing some of these optimism funds to her to host her hacker house in Paris. To then later on, we also created like these cohort streams where now we're streaming to some of the folks from the hacker house from this OP funding. And then when she announced, so we were kind of, I'm like moving to make all this stuff happen in the first place, and she announced her hacker house, and someone from Optimism, I think it was Benji, said something like, hey, you should apply, this is a great initiative, to the RetroPGF round 3. And I wanted to respond right there, but like I didn't have everything quite in order. But now I have everything in order. I can tell the story that like she is getting funded from Retro PGF round 2, because we're basically just like a pass through for giving these grants. You give us a big grant, and then we give out a ton of little grants to really high impact places. And that happened here. Like I haven't responded ever to that tweet. I guess it was like June 28th. I probably have lost the window of being reply guy at this point. But it's really cool that, Benji, just letting you know out there, Jesse was funded from that Hacker House round because you funded Build Guild, and Build Guild turned around and funded Jesse for a Hacker House, and then 4 different cohort streams where it's like a Build Guild streaming contract, but it's for a group of people. And she's done a great job of identifying these up and coming high impact devs, and we're streaming to a whole bunch of them. And it's all thanks to this optimism, our retro PGF round.
That that is such an amazing story. Yeah, thanks Michael for shouting out Benji. We'll have to fill him in um, if Austin doesn't respond to the tweet. But that's such an amazing story, and I think that shows some of the power of, right, once you receive the funds, it's not like a grant where you're promising to use them for a certain thing. Once you receive them, you've already earned them. You could go, you know, spend them on like a nice car or something if you really want to. But if you're cool and you actually like the ecosystem, you do things like you're doing, Austin. And um, I think it's awesome that you had the freedom just to make that call and send this, uh, create this partnership with those hacker houses, even though that's not maybe directly under the Build Guild umbrella. It's still a positive thing. So that's actually a really cool story. I think Benji would get a kick out of that too.
I got into the comments there and linked the tweet too. Yeah,
Okay.
no, it just happened to work out that way, right? Like we happened to find Jesse, we happened to find like a handful of different people. And also like, this is so Build Guild. Like this gives you a story of Build Guild. We knew that we wanted to create these cohort streams. We had run into Jesse. Jesse liked our streaming mechanism. Uh, this guy, Steve P., who helped with the Hacker House in Denver, was like, why don't you do streams for grants instead of just giving grants? And that was like such an obvious thing once I, thought of it from the other side of it. But thanks for Steve P for coming up with it. That instead of just like giving small grants, we should do it in the form of these streams. And so we sat down as the Build Guild. It's known as BG Labs. It was Etta and Carlos and I, and we just hit record and we pull up Scaffold-Eth and we build this thing. We write the smart contract that allows you to stream to a group of people. We build the front end that lets people withdraw. We built the entire app that became the cohort streams that gets forked out to all these different cohort streams for Jesse and a handful of people and used internally. But we built it live on camera, and you can go find it and watch through like all the different technical decisions we made as we were going through it. Like very, very much like open learning, open building, and then all of it coming around to like open funding for the ecosystem. And that's why I think that Build Guild resonates with folks, is because we're doing stuff like this that is just so like I don't know, like regenerative in so many ways, and on chain, and in very very in open in public.
Is is that stream recorded on YouTube still,
Yep.
or
Yep. If you just go to buildguild.com, so it's BuidlGuidl, right? You have to go to
right? Yeah.
buildguiddle.com. But down at the bottom, you'll find BG Labs and also cohort streams. Maybe I could just like find, I've got a tweet for cohort streams that I could paste into the chat. And it really like explains like, here's what a cohort stream is. Here's like who we're streaming to now, but also like, here's all of the links to different videos of us going through and build it. I'll paste it into chat now.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I'll definitely put that in the notes of the podcast once this gets uploaded uh, to other places as well. I'm curious for the dedicated listeners in the audience, if anyone wanted to jump in with a question or anything like that. Although we don't have too much time left, but if anyone has anything they'd like to say, just go ahead and raise your hand if you do. Um, so Austin, thank you so much for coming. Um, I'm curious, maybe just to wrap things up, um, what are you excited about for the future of Build Guild, Scaffold.eth, and even optimism in general?
So I think our main focus is developer onboarding and education. And I have to say that up front because the thing I'm really excited about is less to do with that. And I want to make sure that I like make a point that like that is our main focus. But I think the thing that I'm really excited about is how L2s are starting to come full swing now. We saw like all the stuff happening on base chain in the last few days. We've seen a couple apps come out that kind of give you a hint at like what mainstream audiences might actually F around with in crypto. And so I think that like within the Build Guild world, we are just prototyping applications all the time. So I think that there's some kind of home run just waiting to happen here with lots of builders learning in the open, building on L2s, building applications that people will actually use, building smart contract applications that are actually decentralized, but on L2s where it's fast and quick and cheap. Maybe even throw in like ZK is just now getting to the point where it's like, consumer ready. We have this kind of like really cool kind of combination of a handful of things coming together that I think that the application space is about to explode. And I feel like Build Guild has been spending a lot of time nurturing that application space and nurturing the tools around it and the people around it. So I'm just really excited about what I consider sort of a combo move of the Build Guild, and that's all the cool prototypes and products that are going to come out the other side now that we have these L2s that we can deploy to that, have mainnet security, but quick, fast transactions. Hey, Benji showed up. What up? What up?
Hey, Benji. Yeah, I think you're so right that we basically have this primordial soup of positive things, and EIP 4844 hasn't even come out yet. And we've got all these developers, all these new chains on the OP stack, all of all of these builders that are really getting on chain, and fees lowering and things getting faster. So I'm also excited to see what comes out of that, because those applications are really going to be what drives the next level of bringing blockchain to more people. We had a speaker requested. Austin, if you have to go, no
I just
worries.
wanted to give one shout out there. I was talking about L2s and you kind of like really leaned into the OP stack. And I just wanted to give an OP stack shout out for a second. I think there's only a few things in the space that have come along that are really useful and really forkable. And you don't see that very often. You see someone make something very useful that isn't very forkable, or you see someone make something very forkable that's not really that usable or applicable. But now and then something like the Moloch DAO comes along and people fork the shit out of it because it's really interesting. And they make a bunch of interesting DAOs with a bunch of interesting little tweaks and changes to it. And it changes the entire landscape. And I think that the OP stack is doing that right now too. And so huge shout out to the OP stack and the forkability of that stack, because it's, we're seeing it getting redeployed and redeployed and redeployed everywhere, and it has that perfect combination of usefulness and forkability.
That's awesome, especially coming from a developer and developer advocate like yourself. Um, okay, I'm going to add this person as a speaker. Uh, and Austin, if you have to run, just say the word. Um, but we'll just take this one question, and maybe we can fill Benji in on just quickly on what we were talking about. But go ahead. Did you have a
Yo,
question?
what up? What's up?
How's it going?
Part of Build Guild.
What's up? What's up?
What's it called? Austin. So what is the like the quick and dirty for the estetations for the OP? Like I seen that, but I wasn't familiar with anything about that.
I'm not sure what things. I don't know if I heard what you were saying.
The estetation or attestation.
Attestations.
Yeah.
Oh, attestations. Yeah, yeah, no, that's like the Ethereum attestation service is one of the protocols that they wanted to use for the badge holder voting. I think what they want is to have an application where badge holders vote, and then basically they attest to their votes. And normally in Web3, I would just rebuild it and I would have them sign a message and that would go into some storage. But I think that OP was thinking, let's use something that already exists, which is the Ethereum attestation service. When I go to their website, they totally ripped off stuff straight from the ethereum.org website. So, but if OP gives them the nod that we should be using EAS, like Ethereum attestation service, we did. And that's what we went for. So it's just an attestation service where you have like I think there's like an API or like a format for how you go about attesting to something. But your attestation is basically just you signing something. It's you saying, I like ice cream, and then I sign it with my wallet, and you can tell cryptographically using your key pair that, or anyone anywhere can tell from your signature that you signed that thing. So it's
Ah,
kind of like how, yeah, signatures on chain work, but it's for attesting to sort of off-chain details. You sign a message and you can cryptographically prove it.
it's like a PHP key or something like that.
Yeah, yeah, PGP. Yeah.
PGP. Yeah.
It's like you're using your key to sign a piece of text, and then anyone down the road can take the piece of text and your signature and derive your address from it to prove with math that you had signed it at some point.
Ah, cool. Thanks for explaining that.
For sure.
Awesome. Thanks for the question. I really wanted to hear Benji's response to to what you were saying earlier, just because that is a good
It's
story.
like we're
So,
it's like we're throwing shade and you're coming out of nowhere to like defend yourself, but really we're just talking some cool shit.
yeah. Um, Here, wait, Benji, did you want to turn your mic on? I don't know if you're in a place where you can, but Austin, did you want to just tell the story real quick?
Yeah. Okay, so it was a reply. So I think I mentioned it in the tweets. Yeah, and Benji found it. Yeah. So, uh, yeah, TLDR, you, Benji, said something like, wow, Jesse's Hacker House is a great initiative. You should sign it up for RetroPGF round three. And right at the time, I was making all the moves to get it to work. So she actually got funded from RetroPGF round two, because money that went to Build Guild immediately turned around and went to funding Jesse's Hacker House in Paris, and then deploying a set of cohort streams that we funded that are basically like developer UBI. They're developer streams going to a whole bunch of hackers from the Hacker House. So it's funny, like Benji dropped in and was like, yo, we should see this funded. And it was really funny at the time. I was like getting it in order, so I didn't comment at the time, but now it's like it all happened and it all worked out, and we built this cool cohort stream thing, and we took to optimism. We are, it's still mostly optimism tokens, but we had to, in this instance, convert them to ETH and then stream the ETH to the developers. But in the long run, we'd really love to have that cohort stream, but have it stream op tokens to builders. So Optimism gives us op tokens, and then we stream op tokens to builders, and then builders decide what to do with the tokens. That would be the best thing. But
That's so
rolling back,
awesome.
yeah, Benji, you were basically like, man, I wish this is a great initiative. It should be funded, and it was actually the whole time being funded behind the scenes from just the fact that the ecosystem is so good and so connected and so altruistic that you gave money to the right people, and the right people passed that money on to Jesse and that crew.
Hey guys, I absolutely love that. Like, thank you for sharing. I think honestly, like, if you look at some of the learnings in governance, where let's rewind the clock back like a year, um, the entirety of governance would have was voting on like who should get X proposal, who should get Y proposal, and what you lose out when there's too many like people in a generalist sense, like trying to vote for something that's very specific, is you might lose some like expert opinions that might actually like create more impact on what actually like in the decision making behind what actually gets funded. So the evolution that happened in the governance side, this is not RetroPGF, by the way. The evolution that happened on the governance side there was essentially um we started like having this builders council and this grants council where we all now we have like contributors who just have been doing like funding for years, just like working as delegates for the collective. And if you look at the grant process now in Optimism, it's way better formed. It's significantly more like analytical as well. Like there's a lot more going on there. And I think one of the really cool things with what you guys just shared is like BuidlGuidl, like you guys know what builders need. Like you have been doing this for years. Like this is like something that you're spending, like Austin, you're spending like every day thinking about. And that is an irreplaceable skill that not a lot of people have. And not a lot of people have that experience either. And essentially like this RPGF program is more successful in my eyes as well when we're able to empower you to then go and make that decision, because you then are exposed to Jesse's Hacker House and the rest is history essentially. And like I really really strongly believe in that power of like how can we find groups that are very values aligned, that have expert opinions and expertise within generally like the realm of funding the right things, and then how can we empower them to help guide where the OP goes. I think it's really cool to hear.
Yeah, it really is an amazing story. Go ahead, Austin.
No, I was just gonna say heck yeah. I was just gonna gas up the conversation some more. Heck yeah.
The feedback loop wheels are turning. So, and I think that's just exactly right. One of the beautiful things is that the right Austin had the freedom to make that decision without having to check in with anybody. Um, well, we've
Honestly,
gone.
like
Oh, go ahead.
retroactive is the best for me. Like when people ask me like, okay, so what are your next steps? I can give them like what I think I'm going to do in the next few months. But when I have the freedom to like figure out what's going to emerge from the certain things that I have, like I can build a lot cooler things. So I work way better as a creator by saying, continue to fund me because here's the last three cool things I did, and I'll keep doing cool things, right? And it's the perfect model for retro PGF. So I just think that like retro PGF as a model is really powerful and really helpful for people like me that are creators that want to build this stuff, but they don't like I'm not like hella strategic, right? I'm just sort of strategic. like I'm trying to get things done, but I don't know exactly how we're going to get certain things done. And I'm way better if you can just give me a little confidence and let me ship some things and like get the flywheel rolling.
Yeah,
I,
it's like going one to one versus one to many, and like going through BuidlGuidl in this sense is like it's going one to many. Where Jesse's Hacker House is likely one thing, and then there's probably a variety of other things as well that's on your radar that individually on their own they may not have like gotten funding, but because like BuidlGuidl gets that funding and then is able to distribute it again, that's like honestly one of the best superpowers in my mind about like RPGF and just democratizing access to funding and democratizing like who gets to give that and distribute it as well.
awesome. Well, Austin, thanks again. I think this was a really fun conversation. We're definitely going to post it on YouTube and other podcast platforms. And I'll be sure to put the notes of some of the links that we talked about in the description. Um, but thank you, everyone who tuned in. It was awesome. Austin, thanks again. We'll let everyone go and have a nice Friday, but thanks for coming.
Happy Bow Tie Friday, y'all.
Happy bow. Oh, we're both wearing bow ties. If
Yes,
you
of
guys
course.
didn't miss, if you guys missed it at the beginning. All right, thanks everyone. Have a great weekend, and thanks again, Austin.